Welcome back everybody to evolution versus creation. So in this video I'm going to go through the solar system with you guys, and I'd like you to stick around till the end of the video because I'm going to show you some very amazing and surprising things about our constellations in the stars that actually reveal the gospel being preached throughout the stars, which of course makes sense because God's the one who made them. And it's kind of knowledge that's been lost. We're so disconnected in our modern culture from so much of creation, including the stars at night, because we can hardly ever see them. So stick around to the end because I'm going to go through the story of the stars in our constellation. So I hope you enjoy that. But just at the beginning here, I want to go through a little bit of the Big Bang. And so, to be honest, without the existence of a master designer, the Big Bang, in my opinion, takes far more faith to believe in than a creator. That everything started from this state of nothingness and it exploded into what we see today. And, even secular scientists admit in their own words that the universe is incredibly fine-tuned. And I'm going to get into that in this video as well, just how fine-tuned the universe and our planet within the solar system and within our galaxy really is. And so just a lot of really cool things that we've discovered and learned as we've looked into space and as we've looked at our solar system and everything around it. And so I'm going to go through some of that in this video. But, the Big Bang, just to sum it up quite simply, is that everything that we see today started out as a ball that was smaller than the period at the end of a sentence. The ball began to spin very, very quickly, and then it exploded into what is now our known universe. And so, this very theory goes against observational laws that we have, like the law of thermodynamics, which is, you can't get energy and matter from nothingness. It can't be created or destroyed. And so there's a number of laws that just what we've observed this theory goes against. But the age of this is also determined by scientists who have looked at the fact that the universe is expanding. And so with all these galaxies that are moving apart from one another, if you extrapolate this backwards, then they would have to meet at a point. And they believe that meeting was about 13.7 billion years ago. I'm going to show you a picture in a textbook after this slide that'll say a little bit older. They've kind of gone back and forth between 20 billion and 13.7 billion, but 13.7 billion is the number that they have right now, and so that'll probably change again, but it's what we got today. And so if you extrapolate backwards this expanding, again, you would come to a single point 13.7 billion years ago. But what I also find interesting about this theory is that we can't see the whole universe. So at what point do you begin to extrapolate backwards to come up with this number? Because we can't see the whole universe. We can only see as far as we can see. And so they're going based off the information that we just have today. But, in a number of years, I'm sure we're going to be able to see a lot further than we can today, just like we can see a lot further now than we could, let's say, back in the 1960s. And so just coming up with this number in and of itself is, I just don't know how you can accurately do that. So it's kind of a funny thing in my own opinion. But here's a picture from a textbook I wanted to show you. It says, if the universe is expanding, then it must have once been much smaller. And if you could run the life of the universe in reverse, which is what I was just describing, like a film, you would see the universe contracting until it disappeared in a flash of light, leaving nothing. And this is the part where it gets interesting, guys. In the realm of the universe, nothing really means nothing. Not only matter and energy would disappear, but also space and time. However, physicists theorize that from this state of nothingness, the universe began in a gigantic explosion, and they say here, 16.5 billion years ago. The theory of the origin of the universe is called the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory does not explain how the universe began. The theory only explains how the existing universe could have developed. So even in secular science, guys, the Big Bang doesn't solve how it actually began. It just explains how it developed. And so what's strange to me about the wording in this is it's really saying that we started with nothing, which exploded from nothing in a state of nothingness, and now we have everything. And I just think that's comical, if I could be honest. Like, how is that scientific? That doesn't make sense to like a 5-year-old. And so I'm not sure how this theory can hold up to honest scientific scrutiny when you look at what it's really saying. And so if we're supposed to believe that against all the known laws that we've observed that make this impossible, it was somehow possible once upon a time. And so the Big Bang Theory wants you to believe that time, space, and matter started from nothing and appeared all at once. And I went through this in my last video, or not my last video, my first video, and I just want to show it to you again, that the Bible has something very different to say. Genesis 1:1, the very first verse in the Bible says, "In the beginning, there's time. God created the heavens, there's space, and the earth, there's matter." And what's also really, I think, cool about the Lord is that He's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We have a triune God. We are made body, soul, and spirit. We have a tripart being in our own existence. And so we're made in the image of God. And so you see this trinity here of time, space, and matter. But what's interesting is there is a trinity within the trinities. Time is a trinity. It has a past, present, and future. Space has a trinity, which is height, width, and depth. And matter has a trinity, which is solid, liquid, and gas. And so again, we're just seeing what I believe are God's fingerprints on the very beginning of time, space, and matter. And the very beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, we see that there's this funny trinity within trinities that, again, to me expresses the nature and the character of who God is, and He's leaving His fingerprints in these little things for us to find, and I just think it's really interesting. So there is a proven and observable law that I want to show you guys that's in our universe, and it's the law of the conservation of angular momentum is what it's called, and it simply means that when something is spinning in one direction and something comes off of what is spinning, the object that comes off will spin in the same direction as the object which it came off of. And so, as you can see here in these circles here, there's a circle spinning, and if a circle were to come flying off of that circle would be spinning in the same direction as the circle that it came off of. And if a circle came off of that circle, it too would be spinning in the same direction. And so it's called the conservation of angular momentum. And what's interesting about the Big Bang is that it says that we all started from this tiny little spinning circle, this little spinning dot that was spinning so quickly and then exploded. And so, to put it another way, these football players are about to spin these kids on a merry-go-round as fast as they can. And so after reaching 100 miles per hour, all the kids come flying off the merry-go-round and will fly through the air, and all of them will be spinning in the exact same direction as the merry-go-round, until, of course, they hit something and stop. So what does this have to do with the Big Bang? If our universe all came from a spinning ball, then we would expect to see every moon and every planet and every galaxy that came from it to be spinning in the exact same direction. However, we don't. 8 of the 91 moons rotate backwards that we know of. Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune have moons orbiting in both directions. And Venus and Uranus also rotate backwards as well. And so this violates the conservation of angular momentum, and therefore it cannot be true that we came from a Big Bang, because they should all be spinning the same way, and they don't. And there's even galaxies that they have found with spiral arms that are also spinning the wrong way. And there's a scientific magazine that came out that was titled The Confused Galaxy because it was spinning backwards. But I would propose to you that it's the scientists who are confused, not the galaxy. The only reason it's spinning the wrong way is because it didn't come from the theory that you believe it came from, which was the theory of the Big Bang, and therefore they should all be spinning the same way, and they're not. And so I honestly think God spun some of these things backwards just because He could, and He thought it would be fun, and He knew that we would come up with something crazy like the Big Bang, and so He wanted to mess with us a little bit on that one. But anyway, we just don't observe the conservation of angular momentum being fulfilled as it should be if the Big Bang really happened like they said it did. Also, if the Big Bang were true, the matter would be evenly distributed. If it all exploded and went flying out, the matter should be evenly distributed. But it's not. Instead, it's lumpy, and there are clusters of stars, and then there are great voids of stars within space. And so we don't see what we should see if the Big Bang was true when we look at the solar system as a whole. And to be honest, this came to be such a problem that there was an open letter given to the scientific community that was published in New Scientist on May 22nd, 2004, and it was titled Bucking the Big Bang. It was signed by over 160 scientists across the world, most of whom were atheists, and they were signing this document saying that what we know now and what we have observed goes to show that there are major problems with the Big Bang, and we need to, like it says here, bucking the Big Bang, we need to get rid of it and come up with a different theory, because what we've observed and seen just make this theory no longer possible. And so again, most of these scientists were atheists, and this is 2004. There's been numerous more scientists that have been added to this list that agree, and they're secular scientists that just say, hey, we got to dispose of the Big Bang. There's just no way it could have happened like we originally thought. And so they're actually moving away from this theory in secular science today. Also, I just wanted to point out that the founders of modern science, like Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, and Newton, they are all believed in God and all believed that creation revealed a designer. And so, for instance, Galileo said that mathematics is the alphabet which God has written the universe, with which God has written the universe. And Sir Isaac Newton said, gravity explains the motions of our planets, but it cannot explain who set the planets in motion. God governs all things and knows all that is or can be done. And so, again, they just believed that the universe was the product of a mind, and that to understand its creation was to get a mere glimpse into the brilliance of the mind of God and to discover how he put the universe all together. So, going back in history, again, the founding forefathers believed in God. And again, just thought that all of creation really revealed that. And so I thought that was kind of interesting to throw in, because there's the separation between science and God is a lot more modern. And what's kind of cool about the 21st century, which we're now in, obviously, is that there is a convergence happening again between God and science, where we have learned so much now that we're not departing from the Lord. We're actually coming back to him because of the observations and the discoveries that have been made in the 21st century. I'll go into that a little bit more in my next video. But, we kind of veered away from God in the late 1700s, 1800s, 1900s. And again, just now with what we are continuing to discover, we are going in a direction that is veering back to God, back to intelligent design, because it's just staggering the discoveries that we have made. And so anyway, I just think it's been cool, this journey of beginning with God and then going away from God and coming back to him again. It's just something that we often see in culture. And so I want to look at our privileged planet and also ask the question, the universe is massive, as we know. Like it's you can't even really comprehend it. And is it possible that there could be other planets like ours in the universe? What makes ours so special? And is it here by random chance, or is it very intentionally and intelligently designed? So I want to explore the facts with you, and honestly, you can make up your mind for yourself, and you can decide. But look at these facts with me, guys, and really just think about it. Could this possibly have happened by random chance? Or, like secular scientists say, is the universe so finely tuned that it really leaves your head scratching if you believe it came by random chance? And I want to look at some of these things. But, just thinking about our world, is it possible that we could find life on other planets? And I think, God says something really interesting in Isaiah. He says that he made the earth to be inhabited. It says, "For thus says the Lord who created the heavens, who is God, who formed the earth and made it, who has established it, who did not create it in vain, who formed it to be inhabited." So ever since we had the ability to look into space, mankind has searched for life on other planets, but to no avail. Yet in all of creation, which includes the whole universe, the Lord himself says only of the earth, "I made it to be inhabited." And I think that's really, really neat, because we don't hear him saying that about any other place. It's only the earth that the Lord has made to be inhabited. So if that's true, our earth should be something of a very rare find in the solar system. And it is. The solar system has a habitable zone, And so our very placement within our solar system, and even, to be honest, the Milky Way galaxy, reveal a Goldilocks planet. We're not too hot, we're not too cold, we're not too far, we're not too close. For example, if the Earth was just 5% closer to the Sun, it would become like Venus, with temperatures as high as 482 degrees Celsius, making life here impossible. And if you go the other way, and the Earth was just 20% further from the Sun, carbon dioxide clouds would form in the upper atmosphere, initiating the ice and cold that has sterilized Mars. We are just in the right place, not too close and not too far. We also have what's known as guardian angel planets, which are Jupiter and Saturn. And here's a little picture where you can see just how enormous Jupiter and Saturn are compared to Earth. And they call them guardian angel planets because of their position within our galaxy in relation to where we are, and how they're positioned in a way that actually protects us. And the way they protect us is there are innumerable comets flying around, but because these planets are so big and because of where they're positioned, they actually take the hit. They take the majority of comets. And the ones that might go in between them are the gravitational pull on these planets is obviously so massive that even the comets that miss these planets often get sucked into them because the gravitational pull from them is so powerful. And so they've been deemed as our guardian angel planets because they protect us from so much of the stuff flying around in space. If you look at our sun is also very special. It's a very special star. And if life was ever to be found elsewhere in the universe, it would have to be around a star just like ours. Look how enormous that is. It's incredible. So we orbit what is known as a spectral type G2 dwarf main sequence star. It's a bit of a mouthful, which is perfectly suited for our needs. If the sun was smaller, which would be like 90% of our other stars in this galaxy, if it was smaller, it would cause our current position in the galaxy to make the Earth uninhabitable. And so the sun is just the right size. If it was bigger, we would cook. And so we're not only is it the right size, but we're also just the right distance from it. And even if the sun was smaller, but you moved the Earth closer, we would still have a big problem because the gravitational pull from the sun would cause our rotation to be moved into synchronization with the sun's orbit, which would mean that the Earth would no longer spin. And so one side of the Earth would be destroyed by the constant radiation from the sun, and the other side would completely freeze over from never seeing the sun's rays. And so we are the perfect distance away from the perfect size of star. Another kind of neat thing is that the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, and yet it also happens to be 400 times closer to the Earth than the sun is. And this is precisely why we get the perfect eclipses as seen from Earth. Any difference in size or distance of either the sun or the moon, and we would not have the perfect eclipses we have always known, which God said would be for signs and seasons in Genesis 1:14. This coincidence is not known in any other known planet / moon relationship. So anywhere else we look in the galaxy, we do not see this. You would not be able to see these eclipses like we see them, where the moon is exactly 400 times smaller and yet 400 times further. And so that's how we get these perfect eclipses. And is that really a coincidence? Or is that the Genesis 1:14 where God's saying, I made these things for signs and for seasons? And while we're on the moon is just the right size to square the circle of the Earth. I think God loves math. So if the moon did not exist as exactly as it does, then neither would we. Our moon is incredible. A quarter size of the Earth, the moon's gravitational pull stabilizes the Earth's axis at exactly 23.5 degrees. This ensures relatively temperate seasonal changes and the only climate in the solar system able to support complex life. Take away the moon or change its size or distance from the Earth, and we again would quickly digress to a planet like Mars. So the moon is incredibly important. Again, its size and its distance. And so the moon is incredibly crucial to our existence on the planet. If we take a look at the Earth's crust, it's only 35 kilometers thick and makes up less than 1% of the Earth's mass. And so we live, really, when you take this into account, we live on a paper-thin crust. And if we did not, then plate tectonic recycling could not take place. This process regulates the planet's interior temperature, recycles carbon, mixes chemical elements essential for living organisms, and shapes the continents. Life as we know it would not be possible without plate tectonic recycling. And going into the interior of the Earth, there is the movement of liquid iron that generates a protective magnetic field essential, again, for complex life to survive. If our world were just a little bit smaller, or if we didn't have liquid iron within the Earth, the magnetic field would either be too weak or non-existent, and the sun would strip away our atmosphere, leaving us to become, again, as uninhabitable as Mars. And so looking at our atmosphere appears as this thin blue line when viewed from space. It has the perfect combination of chemicals and thickness, again, to support complex life on Earth. And so measuring less than 1% of the Earth's diameter, it is made up of the perfect combination of gases being 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% carbon dioxide. As a result, our atmosphere gives us a good climate, protection from the sun's radiation, and the right combinations of the gases necessary for liquid water to exist along with complex organisms. This is why the saying, just add water, is not a true statement when it comes to finding life on other planets. The water must have the right atmosphere and be the right distance from the right star in order to be a liquid that supports life as we know it. And so, when they say they may have found water on other planets, it is not that simple to say that and then to conclude that there must be life there. It is way more complex than that to have everything that we need for life as we know it to exist. And the Earth is the only planet by leaps and bounds where this is found to be possible. So the combination of gases making up our atmosphere also enable it to be transparent. And this is something I think a lot of people don't know about, but I find it to be really, really cool. And this of course is what enables us to see the sun, moon, stars, and planets in the first place. We have a translucent atmosphere. Many other planets have toxic atmospheres with far more carbon gases covering them. So as you can see in the picture here, for example, if you were able to survive, which you can't, but let's just say you're able to survive on the surface of Saturn or its largest moon, which is called Titan, or Neptune or Uranus or Jupiter or Venus, even the existence of the stars and moons would be unknown to you. So even grasping a clear look at the sun would be almost impossible at most times, because the atmosphere there is so thick and dense with gases, you would never see the night sky, ever, ever, ever. And so not only does the Earth's atmosphere allow for complex life to exist, but it also enables scientific discovery of the universe all around us to be possible. So the one planet that is by far the most habitable also happens to offer the best opportunity for scientific discovery. Albert Einstein said this. He said, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. That's what Albert Einstein said. And so to put it another way, the discoverability of the universe is not something we needed for good Darwinian survival. It is something additional to it, and would seem to say to any honest astronomer that whoever formed the universe intended to have observers who could discover it. There is no other atmosphere that we see that comes anywhere near what we have on the Earth. And it's this translucent atmosphere that, again, just makes even our ability to observe the universe a very rare and unique ability given what we find on other planets. And so the more we look around, the more we see just how finely tuned our planet is and how our universe is. And so even looking at just a few examples, like gravity. If we didn't have something like gravity that pulls matter together, you would never get plants or stars or complex organisms. And on top of that, if that force of gravity were altered even slightly to be higher or lower, life would cease to exist. Our force of gravity is perfectly tuned. And if you didn't have the strong nuclear force that we have, you would have nothing to hold protons and neutrons together. And so you wouldn't have atoms, which means that we would have no chemistry. Even changing the mass of protons and neutrons would cause massive problems, as they are just the right size. If you didn't have the electromagnetic force, you would have no bonding between chemicals, which means that you would have no light. And if you don't have light, you don't have life. These are just a few examples of many fundamental laws that must all be in one place at the exact same time for life to exist as we know it. And if you wipe out even one of these many principles, or even dial the gauge up or down a little bit, then you would be wiping out life as we know it on the planet. And so not only are these incredible laws and forces in play, but they are also beautifully finely tuned in such a way that altering it just a little bit would cause life as we know it not to exist. And so here's a few known factors needed for life to exist on a planet, and they are as follows. I'm just going to sum up really quickly here. And this again isn't exhaustive, it's just a few. But we need to be in the right location of the galaxy. We must be within the very small habitable zone of the right star. We need to be placed in a planetary system with the right giant planets close by that will shield us from too many comet impacts. The star we orbit is not too small and not too big. And we need to be on a planet with just the right size moon orbiting it to stabilize our axis. The planet we are on has to have just the right thickness of crust that will ensure plate tectonic activity, the right amount of heat generated in its core with the right amount of liquid iron that will produce a strong enough magnetic field to protect us from the right star. We need the right kind of oxygen-rich atmosphere that will allow for complex life to survive. We need enough water and enough continents to allow for the diversity of life and the active biosphere that's needed to support those complex creatures like ourselves. And all these factors must be met at one place and one time within our galaxy. And again, if just one of these is missing, life as we know it could not exist on our planet. And in an attempt to calculate the chances of this happening by chance, scientists have developed an equation using very conservative numbers deemed necessary to support life. And the calculation they came to of the chances of this happening are 1 in 1 quadrillion. That is what scientists discovered when they did this equation. It's 1 in 1 quadrillion. And in other words, this cannot happen randomly, and it would be unscientific to suggest that it could. On a lesser scale, it would be like observing a car and believing that all the moving parts it takes to run were all put in the exact right order and sequence to make it run, and yet happened by chance without any intelligent input or design. You are looking at something here in this picture with a car that is far more likely to happen by chance than what we observe in our Earth, our solar system, and the universe. And so, again, guys, it's just to say that this doesn't have a designer is, I believe, becoming more and more unscientific when we have made these incredible discoveries that we have. So in all the observable universe, it is very hostile to complex life, and nothing even comes close to the planet that we have found that's like our Earth. And these scientific facts are, quite frankly, speaking loudly. And the question is, are we listening to what this is revealing? We are made with purpose. We are created very intentionally, and we also are being invited to intimately know the one who formed us from the beginning. And so I just want to go through some stuff in the Bible with you guys where God, the universe and the solar system and his creation declare and show us who God is. So there's some really neat things that are said in these scriptures, and so I'm just going to read them to you. But this is Genesis 1:14-15. It says, "Then God said, 'Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and for years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth.' And it was so." And so God is setting these things up with intention and with purpose. And they're for signs and for seasons. And there's a lot you could elaborate on the signs part. We've seen a lot of that throughout history. But I'm going to show you a different take on it as well that we see within our constellations. And so Psalm 33:6, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth." By the breath of his mouth. God breathed out stars, guys. This is who our God is. He is incredible. And it says in Psalm 136, "To him who by wisdom made the heavens, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who laid out the earth above the waters, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who made great lights, for his loving kindness endures forever. The sun to rule by day, for his loving kindness endures forever. The moon and the stars to rule by night, for his loving kindness endures forever." The motive of God's heart in making these things for us was his loving kindness towards us. Isaiah 40, "Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these things, who brings out their host by number. He calls them all by name. By the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one is missing." And he says to Abraham in Genesis 15:5, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." And here we just see that God has made all of these stars that are just, there's so many we can't count them. You cannot count them. As far as our solar system goes, I think when they did try to do that, there was 1 trillion stars per person on the planet. That's how many we have just in our solar system, our galaxy. But going beyond that, the stars are just countless. And it says he brings them out and he calls them all by name, by the greatness of his might. And so it's just amazing to see creation and the power of God when we look out and we behold the heavens. And one of the reasons I wanted to go through this with you guys is because in our culture we've become so disconnected from much of creation, and a lot of that is in the night season. At nighttime, I have a hunting camp, and I go out into the wilderness, and I go out and I get way out there where you're nowhere near any kind of light pollution, and you get to behold the heavens as God made them, and to see the Milky Way and the constellations and the stars and the brilliance of the moon. It just leaves you in awe. And I think we've been disconnected from that, and there's been some forgotten knowledge that is being told through the story of the stars that I want to get into with you. And so Job gives us some fascinating information on the constellations. And this is God revealing a number of things to us. And so remember, God is the one who made the stars. The stars belong to him. And so there's been a lot of corruption in the world when it comes to how we view the constellations, how we view the stars. I'm going to get into that in 1 second. But Job 9:8-9 says, "Who alone, God, stretches out the heavens and tramples down the waves of the sea, who makes the Bear, Orion, and Pleiades." These are constellations. And then he goes on, God speaks, and he goes on to say, "Can you bind the cluster of Pleiades or loose the belt of Orion? Can you bring out the Mazzaroth in its season?" Did you guys know that the Mazzaroth is the Zodiac? That's the Hebrew word for Zodiac, which are the 12 main constellations. God's saying, can you bring out the Zodiac in its season? Can you bring out the Mazzaroth? Or can you guide the bear with its cubs? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you set their dominion over the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, that an abundance of water may cover you? Can you send out lightnings that they may go and say to you, here we are? Who has put wisdom in the mind? Or who has given understanding to the heart? Who can number the clouds by wisdom? God here is talking about constellations that we know today by those names. God is calling them out. And so the constellations that we have today go all the way back to the book of Job, which is the oldest book of the Bible. It's the oldest book that we have, and God's talking about the constellations that we have named the same in our sky today. And another super interesting thing is Psalm 19, 1-4 is fascinating. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse of heaven shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world." What are you talking about here, man? Isn't this interesting? And so there are 12 major signs or constellations in the sky that make up what's known as the Zodiac, or what God calls in the Hebrew the Mazzaroth. And around each of the 12 signs are 3 sub-signs or sub-constellations that are known as decans, or a decan singular, decans plural. Altogether, the 36 sub-signs plus the 12 main make up 48 constellations in our night sky. And there's more than that, but these are the main ones. And so again, these constellations have been made by God, and they've been made with great intention, and they do not belong to the New Age world, okay? It's time for us as believers to call the stars back, because they belong to God and they belong to us. The enemy has counterfeited the stars through astrology, okay? Not astronomy, but astrology, horoscopes, and the deification of the universe by these things. But again, these things actually belong to God, because he's the one who made them. And so, even like so much of our secular world talks about, oh, the universe gives me this and the universe gives me that. And it's this deification of the universe. But why would you speak to or worship the universe versus the one who made the universe? Why would you focus on a lesser power? The universe hasn't made anything, but I know the one who made the universe. And so it's time that we call the stars back, because our God is the one who made them, and he made them again with intention, and he's telling a story in the stars that I'm about to get into. And so let's get away from the horoscopes and the deification of the universe, and let's get into what the stars are speaking. What are they saying? And if you think about the wisdom of God in displaying a message in the sky, it would be amazing, because that would be seen by all people throughout all generations. And this is where we find something really cool. So these 12 constellations are literally seen by the entire world. Both the north and south hemisphere are able to see these 12 main constellations, which is why they're called this Zodiac or the Mazzaroth. We all see them, which is really neat. And so there's other like sub-constellations that are attached to these, like I mentioned before, some of which are visible from the northern hemisphere and some of which are visible from the southern hemisphere. But again, these 12 constellations are seen by everyone. And so as the Earth is traveling around the sun, and it's spinning as it's moving around the sun, obviously, we get about 1 to 4 different constellations that are highlighted to us each month. And also each month, at least one constellation is completely blocked by the sun. And so you can see for December there that if the Earth is positioned and we look backwards across to where June would be pointing, we wouldn't be able to see Capricorn in December because the sun is blocking that constellation. And obviously there's 12 months in a year and there's 12 constellations. So as the world is moving around the sun, one constellation gets blocked a month. And so we have this this cycle that's happening of seeing these 1 to 4 constellations each month as we travel around the sun. And so there's a story that is unfolding as you look at these constellations that are appearing in different months. And the cool thing is here is that, remember in Psalm 19, the verse I just read to you, in verse 4, some translations say that they're speaking of the constellations, their line has gone out across the world, and other translations say their sound has gone out across the world. And what's interesting about the Hebrew word there is that the word line can be used as a measuring line, but metaphorically it can also be used as a string on an instrument that makes a sound. And I'm going to show you the sound of the stars later in this video, but what that Bible verse is referring to when it mentions line is it's mentioning this ecliptic line, that through this line their sound has gone out into all the earth. So, like the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so, what are these pictures saying? What sound are they giving off? And what are they telling us that has been visible by every human on the planet? And so, that's what we're going to get into. However, just before we do, I want to show you one more little side note here that is super important and interesting to see. And, I don't know about you guys, but when I look at these constellations and I see the different shapes and symbols that they saw in the stars, I sometimes am like, oh man, I don't have a clue how you came up with that. But what's crazy is that despite living in different eras and being separated by vast distances, every major ancient culture group saw the exact same symbols in the stars. And that's amazing to me. So, pictured here on the left is a 5,000-year-old Egyptian zodiac, and on the right is a Chinese zodiac. Now, these are thousands of years and miles apart from one another, and yet they have the exact same 48 constellations, the same as the Aztecs, same as the Sumerians. They all saw the exact same symbols. Now, how is that possible? How is that possible unless Psalm 19 is true? And God made it to be so that, quote, there is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their words have gone to the end of the world, unquote. So again, what are they saying, and what have they been saying for as long as the world has existed? And I just think it's really important to point out that this isn't some, Hebrew or Christian interpretation of these stars. It's what everybody has seen across the board. And I see God's divine hand in that he is imprinted on the hearts of people across the world what these symbols mean and what they are, and through the gospel reveals what they mean. And so we're going to get into that here. And so we'll look at the first one here, Virgo, but I just want to say quick that it's a little bit sad to me that this understanding has been lost, and that it's nowhere near as common as it used to be. Back in the day with the disciples, the apostles, Jesus, and the Jews before that, the story of the stars was very well understood in biblical times, that it was revealing a story that was unfolding. And, many other cultures also, seeing the same symbols, had different stories. And so, the Greeks and the Egyptians, they had their own version of the story that obviously differs from the gospel. But what we see playing out in the stars is best explained by the gospel and through the gospel. And in fact, we literally do see the gospel being preached to us through these stars. And so I'm going to go through just a couple of them with you. I don't have time to go through all of them. There's too many, but if you'll notice on my reference page, which is the last slide of this video, there's a website at the very bottom. If you go to that website, you can go through all the constellations that go through the meaning and the stars' names in a lot more detail. So if you want to check that out, please do. It's just would take too long to go through them all here, but I just want to just show you a few that, again, are telling us a story that is fascinating. And so the first one here, like I said, is Virgo, and it means virgin. And the cool thing about this constellation is that it doesn't matter what language or people group or culture you go to, every single time this star is, or this constellation is named, it's always named the Virgin. And what's also interesting is that all cultures and people see that the Virgin is holding a branch in her hand. And what's really neat about this is Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah all call the Messiah the branch that was to come. And Isaiah 7:14 prophesies that the Messiah will be born through a virgin. And so right here, guys, in Virgo, we see the virgin that is bearing the branch, which is the Messiah. It's prophesying that Christ will come through a virgin, just like Isaiah 7:14 says. And so the different stars that make up this constellation also have different meanings. For example, the star on the Virgin's hip is called Speca, which literally means the promised seed of the one to come. The promised seed of the one to come. Another star is called the Vinda Matrix, which means the shoot or the branch. And so within the Virgin, there's also a star that's named the branch. From the Virgin will come this branch. And there's another star called the Al-Maradan, or Maradan, and this means the sent one shall come down and he shall have dominion. So the Virgo constellation has been prophesying the birth of Christ since the beginning of creation. And it's a story being told in the stars that's visible for all to see. Moving on, we see the constellation Scorpio, which is obviously a scorpion. And it's underneath of another constellation, I'll get into it in a minute, which is a constellation of a man. But God here in this Genesis 3:15 is speaking to Satan. And he says, "And I will bring enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike or bruise his heel." So that's something that God says to Satan in Genesis 3:15, that Satan's head is going to be crushed, but he is going to bruise or strike the heel of her offspring. And it's actually a prophecy of Christ coming. And so again, it doesn't matter what secular constellation chart you look at, be it Egyptian, Chinese, or Aztec, they all depict a man standing above the Scorpio constellation. The tail of the scorpion is raised up to strike the man's heel, and the other heel of the man is raised up to crush the scorpion's head. It's kind of interesting too, because Luke 10:19, Jesus tells us that he gives us authority to trample on snakes and scorpions. And so the scorpion's tail portion, there's a star there, and that star is called Laseth in Hebrew, or Leshain in Chaldean, which means the perverse one. It's one of the stars in the Scorpion's constellation, means literally the perverse one. The brightest star in the Scorpio is called Atarasa. I'm probably pronouncing these wrong, sorry guys. But it's a form of anti-Eris, meaning literally against the Lamb. The brightest star in Scorpio, the meaning of that star's name literally means against the Lamb, and the Bible calls Jesus the Lamb of God. The star in the man's heel being struck is called Shufor, which means bruised. That star in the foot of the man that the scorpion is about to strike literally means bruised. You cannot make this stuff up, my friends. That's exactly the fulfillment we see taking place in Genesis 3:15. The star story shows, just as we zoom out here, the mighty man or strong man, which is another constellation named Ophiuchus, restraining serpents, which is the serpent constellation, who is trying to reach the constellation Corona, which means crown. And so here you can see this strong man is grabbing this serpent, it's going between his legs, and it's the head of the serpent is reaching up to grab Corona, which is the crown. And the man is also about to step on the scorpion's head to crush its head, while the tail is stinging its heel. And so here we see the full story of the strong man restraining the serpent, crushing the scorpion's head while his heel is being bruised. We see the gospel playing out in the stars. How about Capricorn? This again is often just so known because of horoscopes, and I want to take this away from horoscopes and show you what it really means. And so this is a goat fish, or sometimes it's called in some cultures the sea goat. And so the goat was a sacrificial animal. The sea is an almost universal picture of humanity. The brightest star in this constellation is actually a double star. It is called Dinib al-Gedi, which means the judge who is the sacrifice. The judge who is the sacrifice. The goat in ancient Israel had a double role to play. So one was designated as a scapegoat who would vicariously carry the sins of the people into the wilderness, and another goat would be the sacrifice. The Messiah was both. And so we see this in Isaiah 53, 4-5, where it says, "Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed." In line with the picture presented in this constellation, as well as many passages in the Bible, Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man. He was from humanity. That's the fish part. He was the sacrifice, and that's the goat part. And as the double star informs us, he is also the judge as well as the sacrifice. And so we see here in this constellation the fulfillment of Christ coming as a sacrifice on behalf of humanity. And he is also the judge who came as the sacrifice. So he's both. Pisces. This is a constellation of two fishes. And the Hebrew for this constellation is Dagim. And the I-M, the Dag-im, is plural, indicating that there's obviously two of them. So it's translated fishes. The Syrian word meaning the same thing is nuno. And biblically, the two fish represent the two bodies or assemblies belonging to Christ. Israel being the earthly or the horizontal fish, and the body of believing Christians is, or the Gentiles, is the vertical fish. Together, they represent both the earthly and spiritual bodies belonging to God. The old star charts show the hoof of Aries, which is the ram, resting on the band which binds these two fish together. This again therefore indicates that these two bodies or assemblies are belonging to the Lamb of God or the Messiah. And so Jesus is also interesting. Jesus told Peter in Matthew 4:19, he says, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And we see that after Jesus was resurrected and the Holy Spirit was given, they went out to preach to both the Jews and the Gentiles, the ones who were belonging to God. And so we see that they did become fishers of men, and we see Pisces in the sky representing both the Jews and the Gentiles, or Israel and the church. It's a really neat constellation that reveals these two things. Moving on, we see Libra, which is the weighing scale. Now the Alpha, or the brightest star on the right of this constellation, is called Zubin el Genubi, and it literally means the balance, purchase, or price is deficient. The balance or the purchase and the price is deficient. And so the Beta star, which is the uppermost star, the top left there, is Zubin el Shamali, meaning the price which covers. The price which covers. Isn't that interesting? It's also on the very top, like it's covering the rest of the constellation. It's the price that covers. The Hebrew name for this star is kafar, which means to cover, or it means the atonement. The atonement. So the star Gamma, connected to the Beta star, which is coming down on the left there, is Zubin Akrabi, and it means the price of the conflict or the price of the war. Really interesting constellation. So remember how I mentioned that in each constellation there are 3 sub-constellations called decans. There are 3 sub-constellations that surround it. Interestingly enough, is that one of Libra's sub-constellations is actually the Southern Cross constellation, which is not visible in most of the northern hemisphere. This is the Southern Cross constellation. It's literally a cross in the sky. The price of conflict is on the cross. So this is one of the things under Libra, where the payment was made for our sins and spiritual evil was conquered. So Libra, the weighing scales also show that our lives fall short of God's standard. The price is deficient, like one of the stars means. We are weighed in the balance and found wanting. But the price that covers, which is the top star in Libra, the price that covers is the atonement made by the Messiah for all of humanity, who paid the price by his conflict against evil and shed his blood to blot out our sins. And so again, Libra is showing us that We have been found weighed in the balance, and we have fallen short of the standard of God. But through the cross of Jesus Christ, he has paid for that price of that conflict which fell short, and has purchased us with his own blood, therefore weighing back the scales to make us in right standing or right balance with God. And last one, but not least, that we'll go through is bootes. Bootes, it looks like booties, but it's not booties. It's pronounced bootes. And so Revelations 4:14 says, I looked, and there before me was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like the Son of Man, with a crown of gold on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. He will come to divide. So this name for the constellation originally derives from the Hebrew word bow and the Egyptian word ba or beyu, and both of them mean the same thing, which is the coming one. The ancient Hebrew name for the brightest star in this constellation has been preserved in the book of Job and was Ewush, meaning to hasten or to come quickly. The second brightest star is called Nicaror, which means the pierced one. I kid you not, it means the pierced one. The second brightest star means the pierced one. The third brightest star is actually two stars together. One is pale orange and the other has a blue-green hue. Together they are called Izar, from Yudu-Izar, which means the prince with God. Another star is called Murphide, which means he who separates. He who separates. The Lord will return to separate the wheat from the chaff. This constellation is a man with a gold crown on his head and a sickle in his hand. And again, this constellation is prophesying the pierced one who returns quickly to separate the believers from the unbelievers. Guys, the gospel is being preached throughout the constellations. I wish I had more time to get into all of them with you, but I just didn't want this video to be insanely long. But the constellations belong to God. He made the Mazzaroth. He made the Zodiac. And they have been preaching ever since the dawn of creation. Paul actually goes on to allude to this, and it's easily missed if you don't know where he's quoting from, but he quotes Psalm 19. So Paul says this in Romans 10. How then shall they call on him whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? Or how shall they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel of peace, who bring glad tidings of good things. But they have not all obeyed the gospel. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our report? So then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. But I say, have they not heard? Yes, indeed. And then he quotes, how have they heard? By Psalm 19, their sound has gone out to all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. He's talking about the constellations. Paul is talking about the stars. This is what he's quoting in Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse of heaven show his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. What knowledge? How is night revealing knowledge? It's revealing it through the story written in the stars, which is the constellations. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. And then this is, in the context, this is what Paul is quoting. And he's talking about the preaching of the gospel in the context of Romans 10. Their sound has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Paul is saying the story in the stars preaches the gospel and has been preaching the gospel since the dawn of time, which is why every ancient civilization saw the same thing. God ordained it so they would see the same thing, because it's his gospel being preached across the heavens every single night, every single year, night after night, year after year. And I just think that that is incredible. And so I want to show you one more thing here. In the next clip, I'm just going to play the sound of the stars for you, literally. So the Hubble telescope in California recorded the sounds that were in space, and they're literally the sound of stars. And so I'm just going to play this audio clip for you, and then I have one more slide I'm going to end with. but I wanted to show you the sound that is playing in heaven, and I believe it's the stars worshiping. It's like a musical symphony is going on in space 24/7, and I just think it's really cool and beautiful, so I'll play it for you. Isn't that amazing? The sound that the stars are making. It's just like they're singing. It's like they're worshiping. Their sound really is going out. This is a picture here of the Earth in this tiny little speck is a picture of the Earth in a single ray from the sun. And I wanted to show you this picture and just end on this slide because it's like, man, look how tiny that is. Like we can't fathom, how massive this universe is and how perfectly we've been designed to fit into it. And this psalmist sums it up well. He says, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you visit him? You have made him a little lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, and you have made him to have dominion over the works of your hands." And guys, when we look back and we see just the solar system and how beautifully we fit into it and all the fine-tuning that has taken place to make life on Earth exist as we know it, and we look at the constellations and the story that's being told through them and how all the ancient cultures saw the same thing, and how, everybody, whether it be the north or southern hemisphere, we can see the Zodiac or the Mazzaroth, we can see the 12 main constellations that are preaching the gospel night after night and day after day. And I just want to encourage you guys, to get out into the wilderness, get out into creation, go somewhere where you can get away from light pollution, and honestly just behold the heavens. That's why it says here, "When I consider your heavens, the works of your fingers, the moon, the stars, which you have ordained." He says, when I consider them, it's important that we consider them. It's important that we get out there and we behold this beautiful universe that God has created. And there's just something that I'm just in awe when I go out and I behold the Milky Way and the stars, like I mentioned earlier. It's just so beautiful. And I feel like, again, in culture, we've been so disconnected from that. And so I want to encourage you guys, get out there, get out into creation. Your strength your faith will be strengthened, and your heart will just be in awe when we remember and consider the heavens and the work of God's fingers. It's so amazing to me. It just leaves me in awe of the power and the might and the splendor and the glory of who God is and what he's like, and how he's displayed it all out there for us to discover, enjoy, see, and understand. And so anyway, bless you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.